Now, after the Battle of Antietam, Lee actually returns to Virginia. The Union claims victory here, even though they lost more troops. And what this really sets up is it gives a victory for Lincoln to get the Emancipation Proclamation through. And if you want to know more about Antietam, there you go. There you go again. Now, in late 1862, Grant had won many battles in the West. But the South still controlled some major forts on the Mississippi, like Vicksburg. Now, Vicksburg was a challenge on all sides, as one side of the fort was the Mississippi, and the rest of the surroundings were tough terrain. In the spring of 1863, Grant starts his siege by cutting off rail access, like you see in the picture from Jackson, Mississippi. The whole idea was if he cuts off rail access, then they won't be able to get any supplies. And he bombards the fort till the Confederates surrender. The Confederates, on July 4th of 63, they actually surrender at Vicksburg. And if you want to know more about the Siege of Vicksburg, there you go. Now, while the Union had success in the West, Lincoln replaced McClellan with Ambrose Burnside. You can kind of see why his last name's Burnside. And Burnside moved to the north side of the Rappahannock River across from Fredericksburg, Virginia. And if you want to know more about good old General Burnside, there you go. Now, it took the Union weeks to cross the river because they're waiting on pontoon bridges so that they could get across. And the Union takes the town very easily as they moved south. They were met by the Confederate Army set up behind a real stone wall who defeated them very easily at Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg was a big loss for the Union. And if you want to know more about Fredericksburg, there you go. And there you go again. Now, after the loss at Fredericksburg, Lincoln replaces Burnside with Joe Hooker. And Joe Hooker tries to outmaneuver Lee by moving to the woods to the west of Fredericksburg at Chancellorsville. Chancellorsville is not actually a town. It was the Chancellor House. That's why it was called Chancellorsville. If you want to know more about Joe Hooker, there you go. Now, Robert E. Lee outmaneuvers the Union Army again by splitting his army three ways, which was a big risk for him because he had a lot less troops. He leaves one group at Fredericksburg just in case they attack at Fredericksburg. He puts one group in front of Hooker's army that he actually led himself. And he sends Stonewall Jackson's units through the woods on this road that they had discovered. Jackson's group actually meets a new unit that was in camp, so they were like sleeping and eating, who they roll up on easily, and they force Hooker to retreat. Now, Chancellorsville did have one big loss for the South, even though the military victory was a huge win. Stonewall Jackson, after the first night, was out scouting. He was out in front trying to figure out where the enemy positions are. And he ends up getting in front of his own lines. He ends up getting in front of his own troops. His own troops could not see who it was in the dark, and they shot him by mistake. So he was shot by his own troops. He actually dies from his wounds at Chancellorsville, and this is a huge loss for the South. And if you want to know more about Chancellorsville, there you go. And there you go again. Now, after Chancellorsville, Lee decides to make a dent in the war. And he decided the way to make a dent in the war was I had to enter the North. And in June of 63, he uses the Appalachian Mountains as cover, and he marches into Pennsylvania. On July 1st of 1863, Lee's forces actually run into the Union cavalry outside of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So Gettysburg was not a battle that was planned. It was a battle that happened because they just kind of all showed up that day. We're actually ahead of picture. So Pennsylvania, and that's where we should be. And now we should be on this one. Nope, now we should be on that one. Okay. Now, on the first day, Lee pushes the Union forces down the hill outside of town, through the town, and up onto the ridge south of town. And now, this is where Stonewall Jackson would have made a big difference. Ewell, who replaced Jackson, stopped because of nightfall. He stopped at the edge of town and did not knock them off the ridge. Jackson probably would never have stopped. And if you want to know more about Gettysburg Day 1, there you go. And more.